Be talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. We got a little bit of a late start here today. Should mention, by the way, right off the top, should have said this on Sunday transparently, but we have so many listeners in Georgia, North Carolina, southeast part of the country. Our thoughts are with everybody. Hope everybody's safe. Hope everybody is recovering. Maybe there's a way that the Torres pod can get involved. I'll think about that over the next day or so. But the show will go on. Again, hope everybody's okay. And we have, I will say this, we got a jam-packed midweek show. So we normally start by breaking down the big games of the weekend. It's a little bit of a quieter weekend, but it's also October 1st as I'm recording. So this feels like a good time. I want to reset my 12-team college football playoff. I had Georgia versus Oregon in the title game to start the season. Don't know if I have that now. And then from there, we will also update the Heisman Trophy race as well. Who is my favorite as we now enter the month of October? From there, we'll take a quick break. We'll talk a couple college hoops notes. One, Gonzaga officially in the Pac-12. What does that mean for the college hoops landscape? By the way, John Calipari does a press conference on Tuesday. A very interesting comment that I think is worth diving into. And we will wrap with a little bit of a sad note as two legends passed on Monday, Pete Rose, Dikembe Mutombo. I actually did have a little bit of a run-in with Pete Rose at Fox Sports. I'll share with you, but everybody I know that worked with him really enjoyed it. And so there's nothing else to add there. But other than that, we're going to be bouncing around. Busy show, fun show. Before we get started, I do want to welcome in our new partner, Blue Chew. Fellas, remember the days when you were always ready to go? Well, you get older, times change, your football team stinks. Maybe you're a Jets fan. After Sunday, you got no energy for anything else. Well, that's where Blue Chew comes in. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in chewable form. To get started with Blue Chew, it's easy. Just go to Blue Chew, consult BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online. No awkward trips to the doctors, waiting at the pharmacy, no stink eyes, no raised eyebrows, no nothing, okay? Of course, as I say that, you're probably sitting there wondering, saying, Torres, does it actually work? Well, try it for a month and see. You're going to love it. Your partner's going to love it. Your football team may be entering October with no shot, but you're going to be the 85 Bears in the sheets with you and your special person, okay? So try it out for free. And here's the great news. Blue Chew does have a special offer just for listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. You get to try Blue Chew for a month when you use our promo code Torres at checkout. All you have to do is pay $5 in shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code Torres to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. We thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the Aaron Torres podcast. So thank you to Blue Chew. It is a busy midweek episode of the Aaron Torres pod. There is no more time to waste. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, as I said, these midweek shows, we always start to kind of look ahead to the college football slate this coming weekend. This weekend, it's a little bit quieter. Now, listen, we all know that every time that we think it's a quiet, low-key, low-maintenance weekend, crazy stuff happens. But at the same time, we still have the Friday show to start previewing the weekend ahead. And so instead today, what I want to do, I want to go ahead and update our college football top 12 playoff picture. If you listen to the show in the preseason, I gave out my top 12 at the time. I'll be quick, but basically my number 1 overall seed was the Georgia Bulldogs. My number 2 overall seed was the Big Ten champ Oregon Ducks. Miami at 3, Utah at 4. And then as we got into the at-large candidates, I had Let's see. I had Ohio State at 5, Bama at 6, Ole Miss at 7, Michigan 8, Notre Dame 9, Texas 10, Clemson 11, Liberty as the G5 team at number 12. Well, we're a month into the season. A lot has changed. By the way, drop your questions and comments into the chat. Who is your number 1 seed at this point in the season? Who do you believe is the favorite to win the national championship? But what I wanted to do today was go ahead and update my way too early top 12, because it ain't way too early anymore. We're a month in. Everybody has played at least a quarter of their season. A lot of teams are a third of the way through with 4 full games. So let's get into our updated top 12. And at number 1, I don't know if this is going to be controversial or not, but it is my SEC champion, the Texas Longhorns. Now, listen, some will sit there and say, Torres, how can you have Texas at number 1? Bama just beat Georgia. Bama, of course, is the number 1 team in the AP poll. And I get it. This isn't a tear down Bama or Georgia or this school or that school. But at the same time, what we have to remember is this. I think that the Texas win against Michigan on the road still carries a ton of weight. I know Michigan has a quarterback problem, but at the same time, let's call a spade here. Texas went to Michigan, dominated a team that physically has dominated everybody else that they played. They got up, and unlike Bama, when Bama got up against Georgia, they let their foot off the gas, and it didn't impact the final score. Texas dominated. Texas won. I know they haven't looked as good the last 2 weeks, but they've still won. I still think if UL Monroe and Mississippi State were Alabama and Tennessee, Quinn Ewers probably plays, but they didn't have to rush him back. He's going to be healthy for the Oklahoma game. They are, in my opinion, the best team that I have seen at full strength. And listen, if something else happens with Quinn Ewers, we'll reevaluate from there. But Texas is the number 1 team in my updated college football playoff. Number 2 team in my updated college football playoff, it is the Big Ten champion Ohio State Buckeyes. And listen, I've been critical of Ryan Day through the years. And the bottom line is, look, we're going to find out a lot more about Ohio State in these coming weeks. They play Iowa at home this week. Obviously, next week is the big one against Oregon on the road. They have to play at Penn State. They host Michigan later in the year. So their biggest games are ahead. But listen, the show is today, and I have to give credit. They have looked awesome. You know, Will Howard has so many weapons at his disposal. Jeremiah Smith with not 1, but 2 one-handed catches the other night. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, they all look great. That Chip Kelly run game is working, and that defense has always been good since Jim Knowles got there. So toughest games are ahead, but Ohio State is my number 2 as the Big Ten champion. Number 3, the team that I had in the 3 spot in the preseason, it is my ACC champion, Miami Hurricanes. And listen, Miami, we'll see. Cam Ward can get a little loose with the football, 2 interceptions the other day against Virginia Tech. Mario Cristobal can get a little loose on the details come game day. But the bottom line, by the way, I think there's a chance they could lose this weekend at Cal. We'll get to that game later on in the week. But when I look at Miami, they are still the most talented team in the ACC, a very advantageous schedule, in my opinion, for the Miami Hurricanes going forward. They don't play Clemson in the regular season. If we still consider Florida State a threat, they get Florida State at home. And even some of those other fringe teams that have looked kind of good early, SMU, they do not play. Boston College, we can make fun of Boston College. They've looked pretty good under Bill O'Brien, not on Miami's schedule. So very advantageous schedule. They would obviously have to win the ACC championship game, but whoever they play, they will be the most talented team. I have Miami as my 3 seed. Number 4, it is my Big 12 champion. It's the same as my Big 12 champion in the preseason, the Utah Utes. Now, look, the Big 12 is wide open, and we talked about it on Monday's show. Can Colorado get in the mix? Is Iowa State a contender? You could go pretty much everybody except like Baylor and 1 or 2 other teams is not in the mix right now. I do still trust Utah, but I'll also readily admit this is a situation where they got to get Cam Rising healthy. He has been in and out of the lineup for basically 2.5 years now. He comes back healthy, immediately hurts his hand, does not play. They beat Oklahoma State, but then they lose last week to Arizona. And so, again, if he's healthy, they're the best team in this league, but they got to get him healthy. They got to keep him healthy. I got Utah at number 4. I don't feel great about it right now. Number 5, It is the first team that is not a conference champion, and another one that might surprise some people. Maybe the second best team I've seen all year, the Tennessee Volunteers. That's right. Josh Heupel's boys are rolling. They're coming off of a bye. We really haven't heard much from them. It's been quiet since that Oklahoma game. But what you need to know about Tennessee is this, is first of all, for a schedule with Bama and Georgia, it's sort of an advantageous road going forward for the Tennessee Volunteers. Already played at Oklahoma, don't have Texas on the schedule, obviously. Listen, I actually don't think that Arkansas game is going to be easy this weekend, but you look at the rest of their schedule, Bama, Georgia, if you split those two, you're probably going to Atlanta for the SEC championship game at 11-1. And so they have the number one defense in the country right now, top 5 run game. Nico is getting better every week. I am here to tell you, I don't think they've even come close to playing their best football. The Tennessee Volunteers at number 5. Number 6, this is where we have the now number 1. No, I take that back. I almost messed up my own bracket. It's my own bracket, but at number 6, I have the team that I still believe is the second best team in the Big Ten. That is the Oregon Ducks, okay? And so when you look at Oregon, they are, in my opinion, the second best team in the Big Ten. Now, again, like basically everybody in the Big Ten, except for maybe USC, their toughest games are still ahead of them. They host Ohio State in a couple weeks. They have to go to Michigan later on in the season. But I give them credit. Early in the season, they really looked like they were struggling. Now, first off, that week 2 game might have been more about Boise being better than people realized than anything else. But they go ahead, they dominate Oregon State. They beat them by 35 points. They win by 21 at UCLA this past weekend. Now they get to return home to Autzen Stadium for the first time in about 3 weeks. They host Michigan State on Friday night. So fun Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern game before they host Ohio State a week from now. And I think bottom line, we'll learn a lot about them and Ohio State. We could do this in 2 weeks, and Oregon could have the inside track to the Big Ten championship. Number 7. This is the team that I thought I was going to mention right there, but number 7 is the Alabama Crimson Tide. This is not a knock on Alabama. This is not a criticism. I know you look at the AP poll, they're the number 1 team in the country. But at the same time, when I look at Alabama, a couple things stand out. First off, you got to go to Tennessee later on in the year. You lose to Tennessee, Tennessee's going to own the tiebreaker against you the same way that you own the tiebreaker against Georgia as we speak. Love Alabama, love what they've done. And we talked, by the way, on Sunday night's show about the possibility of a 4-way tie atop the SEC. I think it's sort of in play. I think what is also realistic is if Georgia beats Tennessee, if Tennessee beats Bama, we could have Tennessee and Alabama tied at 11-1 going into the SEC championship game. Who would have the tiebreaker there? The winner would obviously have the tiebreaker. It'd be Tennessee in that case. So I'm rambling. Point I'm trying to make, I love Bama. You put them in a playoff, as they proved on Saturday. They can beat anybody. I have Alabama at number 7. Number 8, this is going to be kind of interesting, and I'll explain why. Number 8 is the Georgia Bulldogs. And clearly, if you listen to Sunday night's show, I am a little bit more down on Georgia than pretty much anybody else in college football right now. I don't love what they're doing. I don't think it's fixable. But when I look at Georgia, they are going to have a couple advantages. They have that big win over Clemson. That is going to carry weight all year. And then I don't think they're going to be criticized if Alabama keeps winning for losing at Alabama when they had the lead in the fourth quarter, playing Texas on the road. I do think later on in the year, you have a back-to-back against Ole Miss on the road, Tennessee at home. You got to win at least one, if not both of those. But I do have Georgia at number 8. And number 9 kind of comes into play with Georgia at number 8. That is the Clemson Tigers. Clemson is getting so much better week by week. That Cade Klubnik, offense with Garrett Riley is finally starting to figure itself out. And so when you look at that offense, you sit there and say, you know what? They're getting better every single week. I don't see a loss on their regular season schedule. And you play Miami in the conference championship game. Even if you finish at 11-2, even if you lose to Miami, you're still getting into that playoff as an 11-2 team. Now, why I have them at number 9 is because you can't put them ahead of Georgia because Georgia has the head-to-head win. So I have Bama at 7, Georgia at 8, Clemson at 9. At number 10, this is one of the first ones that might be a little bit of a surprise. I have the USC Trojans as the third representative from the Big Ten in the 12-team college football playoff. USC, to their credit, I think has looked, they haven't looked great, but they have the big win over LSU. That's going to carry weight. And then beyond that, you go beyond the LSU win. What I see from USC, we were talking about, I saw all this negative stuff about USC. Oh, they got pushed around against Michigan. Michigan basically had 3 big runs. And oh, by the way, they had to complete a 3rd and long on the final drive. They had to complete a 4th and 1 on the goal line, and they needed a pick 6 to beat USC on the road. USC comes back. They outscore Wisconsin 28-0. Now, the one thing I will say about USC, it does feel like their game 2 weeks from now. Remember, October 12th. It's not just Oregon, Ohio State in the Big 12, or in the Big 10, excuse me. It's Penn State at USC. That feels like a winner is in the driver's seat to make the playoff in some form or fashion. USC's toughest conference games would be behind them at that point. They would still have Nebraska. I don't want to undersell some of their opponents, but I'm just not sold on Penn State. So I have USC winning that game, USC getting into the playoff as the 10 seed, the 11 seed in my new college football playoff. Kind of what we just did with Georgia and Clemson. It's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I'm not a huge Notre Dame guy. Listen, they lost to Northern Illinois. They haven't really looked great except for basically defensively against Texas A&M and that dominant win over Purdue. But at the same time, you just look at the schedule. It's hard to find more losses. And so it's hard for me to sit here and say they're not going to go into the final weekend of the year at 10-1 overall going into the final weekend of the season against USC. I think even if they lose to USC, a 10-2 Notre Dame team is going to get in. Now, I think it's going to be a conversation, but I mean, who else from the Big Ten is going to be in the mix at that point? Penn State maybe, okay. We need to see it. We're already going to have 4 SEC teams. Ole Miss, obviously. I think that Kentucky loss, it's funny, right? Like the Kentucky loss feels like it means nothing, but Ole Miss still has to play Georgia later on in the year. They have to go to LSU. A place they haven't won since 2008. They have to go to Arkansas, a place they haven't won under Lane Kiffin. And so that Ole Miss loss changes everything. So I think Notre Dame will get in as a 10-2 at large at number 11. And finally, at number 12, we do have a new representative for the group of 5. In the preseason, it was Liberty. Right now, it is Boise State. And I got to give Boise State credit, man. Ashton Genty, if you are following college football, I mean, this guy is insane. And we're going to get to the Heisman in a minute. But this guy right now has 845 yards rushing through 4 games. Like, what are we even talking about here? By the way, if you want to say he's only done it against inferior competition, 25 carries, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns against the Oregon Ducks. Oregon barely survived against Boise. And so you look at Boise, they're sitting at 3-1 right now. I think even though they lost that Oregon game, they're going to run the table. They do play at UNLV in a few weeks, which would basically be an elimination game for them if they were to lose that game. Probably, I don't know that 2 losses would get them that bid, but if they beat UNLV without the starting quarterback, I think they'd be in good shape. Boise is my 12th team in my new college football playoff. Again, here is it. Here is the official new 12-team college football playoff. Texas at 1, Ohio State at 2, Miami at 3, Utah at 4. At number 5, we got the Tennessee Volunteers. At 6, we got Oregon. 7, Alabama. 8, Georgia. 9, Clemson. 10, we have the USC Trojans. 11, we have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. 12, we have Boise State. Everybody come in, share your comments, your thoughts, your questions here on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm getting my days all confused, but drop your questions, your comments, whatever. But let's keep it going. And let's now switch gears and let's focus on the updated Heisman through the first day of October. It's October 1 as we're recording here. One thing I would say really quick, because I want to get to this pretty quickly and then get to some other hoop stuff, is basically that, in my opinion, talking about the Heisman transparently doesn't really make sense this early. To me, it's a November, December award. What do you basically do from mid-November on? I mean, you even go back to last year. Jaden Daniels, never forget, Jaden Daniels and LSU were 3-2 coming into September. Into October. On October 1st of 2023, LSU was 3-2, and nobody was talking Jaden Daniels for Heisman. So this stuff changes quickly. By the way, USC was probably 4-0, 5-0, whatever they were, and probably Caleb Williams was the favorite. So things change quickly, but I do want to talk about my updated Heisman coming into this month. And I'll just be transparent. To me, the Heisman is almost a no-brainer right now. October 1, it's subject to change. Travis Hunter, Colorado Buffaloes. And I know every time we talk about Coach Prime, oh my goodness, they're this, they're that, they're overrated, blah, blah. No. First of all, they're 4-1. I think they can win the Big 12. We've talked about them at length this week. But beyond that, what Travis Hunter is doing is quite literally something that's never happened in any of our lives. Okay, I can't speak to the leather helmet, play both sides of the football kind of way back in the day, but you look at what Travis Hunter is doing, okay? And I was thinking about this earlier in the week, and we talked about this earlier in the week, is that, listen, we're comparing him to Charles Woodson, and what Charles Woodson did was absolutely incredible. Okay, let's not undersell or minimize what Charles Woodson did. Charles Woodson, I looked it up, I confirmed it today. He had 11 catches as a wide receiver the year he won the Heisman. Now, he did return a punt for a touchdown, and I think that was where he did the famous kind of Heisman pose. And he was an elite defensive back, 11 interceptions, okay? Travis Hunter right now at his number 2 position, which is wide receiver, he is currently 3rd in the country in catches, 5th in total receiving yards. And that's that's his number 2 spot. He's a cornerback. They never throw him the ball, but he still has 2 interceptions on defense, but he has 46 catches, 561 yards, 6 touchdowns, 12 yards per reception. But the crazy part is he's playing at an elite level defensively as well. I think it's also worth noting, and we talked about this, became the first Colorado receiver ever to have 5 straight receiving games of 100+ yards. So right now, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. I think Travis Hunter should be your guy. I think he probably is your guy. Travis Hunter is my Heisman favorite through just a couple weeks of the season, but we will see what happens from here. Really quickly, number 2 on my Heisman list, I would still probably have Cam Ward at number 2. Listen, he's a little loose with the football for me. As I said, 2 interceptions against Virginia Tech, a fumble and an interception against Florida in the season opener, but he's also balling. 1,700 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, those 4 interceptions that we just talked about. But on the season, this is a guy that is 2nd in the country in passing yardage through all these games. And even his bad games, like the game against Virginia Tech, you sit there and say, he could have been better. 24 of 38, 343 yards. Now, I know how it ended. I know we can debate that. I know we can argue that. But even his bad games are like Heisman level. So I would like to see him take care of the football a little bit more. Miami's schedule is not crazy, but I think this Cal game is weird. I really do. Ask producer Matt, an Auburn fan. They went out there last year and barely survived. 10:30 Eastern kickoff. Miami's going into a bye. But right now today, I would have Cam Ward at number 2. Number 3, a player that I mentioned earlier. I mean, we got to give it up to Ashton Genty, okay? Because when I look at what he is doing, it is just bananas. I mean, guy, like I said, 845 yards rushing, 82 carries, which means he's averaging 10 yards per carry through almost 100 carries. That is so absurd. And don't tell me he hasn't done it against anybody. Oregon has NFL dudes all over their defense. 2 games with already 250+ yards. Plus, as I said, 192 or whatever it was against Oregon. And so I'm not going to diminish him because he plays at Boise or the schedule is this or da-da-da. 845 yards, 13 touchdowns, 10 yards per rush this season. He is my number 3 guy. Now, like everybody else, we'll see if he can keep it up. I think for a running back in this era, it's just so hard because a quarterback can just drop back, make plays. Running back needs blockers. They need, scheme. They need a quarterback that can throw the ball. So to keep defenses honest. So I don't know if he can keep it up, but I don't know how we could not have him at number 3. Number 4, I think this is where it gets kind of obvious. I do have Jalen Milroe at number 4. And I think we are sort of underappreciating what he's doing this season. This is a guy, 964 yards passing, 73% completion percentage with 10 touchdowns this year. That completion percentage up about 7% from a year ago. compare that to Carson Beck, whose completion percentage is down 10%, shows you how good he's been. And then don't forget, Jalen Milroe also 273 yards rushing, 8 rushing touchdowns. He's been awesome. The win was huge. And I think the cool part is there's a lot of big games still on that Bama schedule. At LSU, at Tennessee, at Oklahoma, Auburn, and home. There's going to be plenty of stages for Jalen Milroe to make his case. It's hard for me to put him ahead of any of those other 3 guys, though, ahead of him. Number 4, number 5, and number 6, I'll be quick. I do have 6 guys on my ballot as of right now. I want to give credit to somebody that I think has been a little bit overlooked right now. That is Dylan Sampson, the running back at Tennessee. Tennessee's only played 3 games so far. He's got 449 yards rushing, 6.5 yards per carry, and like Ashton Genty, 10 touchdowns so far this year. So he has been awesome. And obviously the crazy part about Tennessee, those first couple games, he's basically not playing in the second half and still had over 100 yards rushing in each of those games. So I would have Dylan Sampson at number 5. And number 6, how about this? I looked it up on Sunday night. Now, it may have changed since then. He's not even on the Heisman board right now, which I think is a gross oversight. I would have the 17-year-old star, Ryan Williams, at number 6. And what's crazy about Ryan Williams, because to me, it's the most outstanding player, and are you impacting your team on the field? Ryan Williams, quote unquote, only has 16 catches, okay? You want to hear a crazy stat? Ryan Williams is averaging 30 yards per catch. Well, 28.9 yards per catch, forgive me. And when I look at the Heisman, it is a situation where the Heisman should be, are you impacting your team and are you impacting winning? Well, we talked about it after the Georgia game. This was a guy who, if we remember, not only had the game winner against Georgia, which sounds crazy for a wide receiver, but his touchdown broke open the Western Kentucky or the South Florida game when that was close in the fourth quarter. He had 2 TDs against Western Kentucky in week 1, had a big TD that really broke open the Wisconsin game. So another one. I don't know if it's realistic to expect a 17-year-old to average 29 yards per completion going forward. But I'll tell you this, I really do think that he deserves some recognition. Like I said, I looked up the FanDuel odds probably about 6-7 days, not 6-7 days ago, whatever it was, the day after the Georgia-Alabama game. He wasn't even on the board. How about this? Ty Simpson, Alabama's backup quarterback, is on the board, but not Ryan Williams. I think that'll change. If you are in a state with legalized sports betting, see if you can get him on the board, because you could probably get him at crazy odds right now. And if Alabama keeps winning, he is going to impact that. All right. So that is your updated top 25 or updated top 12. That is also your updated Heisman list. This is what we're going to do, though. We're going to come back. We're going to take a quick break. And there are a couple other things that I do want to get to. Gonzaga's headed to the Big 12. What does that mean for the college sports space? Calipari actually said something pretty interesting that I just want to touch on quickly. And then also, Pete Rose, the legend, had a run-in with him, Fox Studio. We'll talk about a legend, a guy that I think should be in the Hall of Fame. Take a quick break. Be right back. Still a lot to get to. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rule shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So I'll tell you what, before we get to the Gonzaga news of the day, which I thought was certainly interesting to say the least, we got a couple really good football-related questions in the chat. So let's get to some football stuff. And by the way, there's more football to come. But really quickly, let's get to those questions. Producer Matt, what kind of questions we got? Because we got some good ones in the chat. So Pog LLC says, why is everyone so against the Big 12 getting 2 teams? Iowa State, Colorado, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State could all finish 10-2, which I think would be way better than Clemson. Listen, I mean, in a world of, I said it the other day, but in a world of gummy drops falling from the sky and money growing on the trees and everybody finishes 10-2, that sounds great. The issue is right now, listen, Oklahoma State already has 2 losses. Kansas State already has a league loss and has not looked good so far in road games. Could have lost to Tulane, did lose to BYU. Colorado, I'm a fan of, but to ask them to, 10-2 means that they're going to go 7-1 down the stretch. That's a lot to ask. Not saying it can't happen, just saying it's a lot to ask. Obviously, Iowa State speaks for itself. They're currently one of the only 2 teams undefeated. So it's certainly in the cards. And listen, if you look at Iowa State right now and you sit there and see their schedule, that's a perfect example of a team, is that they don't play Oklahoma State. They do play at Utah and Kansas State to end the regular season. I mean, if they finish, if they're going into the Big 12 championship game at 11-1 and say they lose to Utah and Utah is 11-1 after beating Iowa State, then yeah, there's a scenario where both those teams can get in. But this is October, and you're talking about an SEC where Texas, Tennessee, Missouri are all undefeated. Georgia has a good loss. Bama has a good loss. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can maintain, because they haven't left themselves very much margin for error. And I think the bigger thing with the Big 12 teams, it's not only that they haven't left themselves margin for error, it's that they've shown real weaknesses. Like I said, Avery Johnson can't take care of the football on the road. Utah, is Cam Rising going to be healthy? Colorado, we'll see. So I just bring it up because to me, it is a very interesting scenario. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I'm just saying, there's a couple teams that kind of have to separate themselves. If everyone is 8-4, 9-3, 7-5 at the end of the year, we're not getting 2 teams into that playoff. Now, one more question before we switch gears here. All right. So I did my 12-team playoff. I did leave out Missouri. Paul brings it up. One team missing is Missouri. They only play Alabama in the SEC. They don't play Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, or Tennessee. I think this is a big weekend for Missouri. We're not previewing week 6 yet because Missouri, Texas A&M is the biggest game. But to Paul's point, if Missouri, and by the way, Missouri has not looked great through the early part of the season. Could have, maybe should have lost to Vandy at home, struggled with Boston College for about 3 quarters. So I just bring it up because if they get through this weekend, then Paul's right. There's not a lot of losses on the schedule. They do have to go to Alabama, as Paul said earlier in the week, or earlier what he said on the show. But they do have a pretty manageable schedule after Texas A&M in the SEC. Auburn at home, Alabama, as we discussed, Oklahoma at home, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State versus Arkansas. And I will say, I think South Carolina is a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. Arkansas rivalry game, we'll see. Arkansas could be 5-0 right now for whatever. So I just bring it up because I think there's the possibility that they could be in the mix. And I do think, to Paul's point, if they're 11-1, it doesn't matter how imbalanced the schedule is, they'll very likely be going to Atlanta. And from there, they will be in the 12-team playoff as an 11-1 team. I need to, like I said, get through Texas A&M this weekend. And I think if I'm doing that updated top 12 next week, Missouri is probably, we got to find a way to put them in. So, all right, let's go ahead, switch gears. Great questions. Drop your questions in the chat. And let's switch gears. Let's talk just a few college hoops topics. Do want to wrap on some Pete Rose stuff because like I said, did have a little bit of a run-in with him at Fox. Quickly on the college hoop stuff. We got more realignment news on, let's say, Tuesday, as the story that Brett McMurphy reported like 2 or 3 weeks ago became official. He put it out. He got a lot of steam. A lot of all the insiders that all get the same scoops at the same time all came back at him. But Brett McMurphy said about 3 weeks ago, he said Gonzaga to the Pac-12 is finalized. And on Tuesday, it did become official. First off, like I said, this doesn't need to be an inside the sports media conversation, but the guy took a lot of heat. He put it out there. You know, all of the other ones, Ross Dellinger, Nicole Auerbach, Pete Thamel, everybody said it's not done. The AD at Gonzaga basically said nothing is finalized yet. He stood by his reporting. He gets to take a victory lap today. In terms of the ramifications, you know, listen, I don't know what to say. Like we've talked about it. I've said all along, the only 2 realignment stories that really matter in college sports right now are what happens to the ACC. Where do the best schools, Clemson, Florida State, UNC, maybe 1 or 2 others, Miami, Louisville, where do they end up? And then the second big question is what happens with Notre Dame? Do they eventually join the Big Ten? Those are the only stories that really matter. But this is interesting. First off, it's interesting because the Pac-12, I think what's interesting is I think Gonzaga realizes that Big 12 invite that I think they thought they were getting about a year ago. I've said it many times. Brett Yormark wanted UConn and Gonzaga to strengthen the basketball product. I think they realized that ship has probably sailed. And now, you know, they're only taking a half a step up, but they are taking a step up. I don't love it because I'm a college hoops diehard. I love that WCC tournament where they run through it and you get that Monday and Tuesday semifinal final where you get Gonzaga earlier in the week. But from their perspective, I think a couple things stand out. One, I don't have the exact TV numbers, but I believe they were making like $2.5-3 million a year in TV revenue in the WCC. And the Pac-12 is telling teams, we're going to get you to 12, 13, 14 million. Now, will they actually get there? I don't know. The Pac-12 has a history of not meeting numbers that they publicly put out there, but I just bring it up because if that's the case, it is hard for me to criticize them if they can triple or quadruple the TV money that they're getting. I'd also say Pac-12, kind of an interesting basketball conference. I know we don't talk about basketball in the grand scheme of things as it pertains to like a Texas, Oklahoma, and Oregon, USC, UCLA, Washington in football. But from the basketball perspective, I mean, that's probably what, 4th best league, 5th best league, something like that. You have Gonzaga, top 5 program in the country the last decade. San Diego State, probably top 10, 12 program in the country over the last decade. Boise State has made, I think, 3 or 4 straight NCAA tournaments. Colorado State is really good under Nico Medved. And now we get to see what they do from here. I think I really only have 2 kind of questions as this pertains to both Gonzaga and the Pac-12. One, Gonzaga had a sweetheart scheduling setup in the WCC. Excuse me. Remember, they only play 16 league games. Most leagues are at 20 now, which allowed Gonzaga to really schedule aggressively out of conference. And I wonder, did they talk to the Pac-12 about, hey, we want this many out of conference games or we're not coming? You know, so are they going to go to 16 league games in the Pac-12, 20 league games? And if they go to 20 league games, does that mean that some of the games that Gonzaga plays early are off the schedule? I'm not going to bore people with college hoops scheduling here in the first day of October, but Gonzaga opens with Baylor to start the season. Best game of the college basketball slate on the opening night of the season. Oh, by the way, they play at San Diego State. They play in the Battle for Atlantis where they're playing West Virginia. They'll probably play Louisville. They'll potentially play Indiana, Arizona, whoever. Then they host Kentucky and Seattle. They play UConn at Madison Square Garden. I mean, just think about that. The guaranteed games that we're going to get: UConn, Kentucky, Baylor, and probably Indiana, Louisville, and maybe Arizona. So I hope that the scheduling stays the same. But to me, that's kind of really the only takeaway. Now, I will say from my alma mater's perspective, UConn, which is, of course, an independent, there have been whispers that the Pac-12 would bring UConn on as a football-only member. So, yes, UConn could be playing Big East basketball and Pacific 12, Pac-12 football. We will address that if it happens. I talked last week about some comments that Tom Herman made about Jim Mora and that program. UConn, by the way, is 3-2, should be 4-1. And oh, by the way, they're like a 16.5-point favorite this weekend. So I think UConn has a chance to have a very good season. I don't think, I said it a few weeks ago. I said, you give them the same resources as everybody in the Big 12. I think they could compete. Not saying they'd be Georgia or Bama, but they wouldn't be competing with Georgia or Bama. They'd be competing with Iowa State and Kansas. So those are the kind of keys to watch with the Gonzaga Pac-12 thing. But that is an interesting piece of news. There is one other piece of basketball news that I do want to get to because, listen, the season it's coming very, very, very quickly here. Season tips off about a month from now. So practices have already started. Coaches are kind of doing preseason press availabilities. And there was an interesting comment earlier in the day on Tuesday from John Calipari, the new head coach at Arkansas. First of all, there was a couple new interesting quotes from John Calipari at his media availability. But so let's get into this because it is an interesting comment from John Calipari at the pack. Let me start over. I'm tripping over my own words here. Okay. College hoops about to start month from now. Producer Matt, drop that Pac-12 Gonzaga logo if you don't mind. Thank you very much. And let's get into this because I thought there was a very interesting comment from John Calipari. Met with the media preseason. By the way, he said something about he got chased by an animal that he had never seen before or something like that. Chin Coleman was with him. But I bring it up because that wasn't really the interesting part of the media availability. Instead, he said something that I thought was worth noting about one of my favorite players in college basketball and transparently a player that I think has totally gotten a really bad rap over the last probably 6 to 8 months, and that's DJ Wagner. Okay, so DJ Wagner, I think most people remember because we talked about him all offseason, was the number one recruit in America for most of his high school career. 2023 he ends up as, the third, fourth best player in the rankings. Maybe it was 5, maybe it was 6, whatever. 5-star. Everybody thought he was going to be a one and done. His dad was a one and done under Calipari at Memphis. And everybody thought, okay, it's going to be kind of this cool bookend as Calipari gets towards the tail end of his career. His first one and done. Now his son playing for Calipari at Kentucky. And so the season happens and DJ Wagner's playing really well. Okay. Then he gets hurt. Then he comes back. And it was kind of that weird time where Rob Dillingham started playing well, where Reed Shepherd started playing well, and DJ was kind of the odd man out, okay? So the season ends, doesn't go well for Kentucky. We know how that ends. I thought DJ was kind of the fall guy along with Calipari, right? Calipari leaves Arkansas, but the big conversation is, why don't you start Reed? Why don't you start Rob? Well, we'll get into the stats in a minute, but Kentucky's actually the best version of Kentucky last year was with DJ Wagner as a starter. I bring it up to come full circle because Calipari was talking about this at his press availability on Tuesday. Producer Matt popped the tweet because, according to my buddy Curtis Wilkerson, who covers Arkansas, this is what Calipari said. Before DJ Wagner got hurt, I believe he was the freshman of the week 3 times. This was John Calipari talking about DJ Wagner, who says if he is healthy, lives in the gym, and has high expectations for this season. And so, look, we're going to do our college hoops preview, deep dive stuff over the next couple weeks. But I am a DJ Wagner stan, and I am a DJ Wagner believer, baby. Okay, so first of all, and we talked about it all spring long when he was in the transfer portal. What did I keep saying? I said, listen, go back to before he got hurt. That team, he was awesome, and that team was awesome, okay? Go back to the beginning of the season, as Calipari said, and I don't know if he got 2 player of the weeks, 3 player of the weeks, whatever. Just go back to before DJ Wagner was hurt. Early in the season, 22 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists against St. Joe's. 28 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a win over Marshall. 14 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists in a win over North Carolina. A SEC opening win at Florida. Remember, Florida was good last year under Todd Golden. He finishes with 14 points, 3 boards. And oh, by the way, at Texas A&M, 18 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists. At Georgia, 18 points, 10 assists. Okay. That is who DJ Wagner was. And it's worth noting, even after the injury and even after he came back, he still ended up his freshman season as a primary starting point guard for a top 10 team, top 15 team, whatever it was, as a freshman in the SEC, averaging just under 10 points and 3.5 rebounds per game, or 3.5 assists per game, okay? 10 points and 3.5 assists for a freshman in the SEC is a very good season. Now, I understand he was he was the number one recruit in his class. Everybody thought he was a one and done. He was projected at the top of NBA draft boards. So if that's the case, I get it. He did not live up to that standard. But by any other standard, he was really good in the SEC a year ago. Let me take it a step further. And we have talked about this, okay? Listen, whenever I stand up for DJ Wagner, it sounds like I'm criticizing other people. But the bottom line is that Kentucky's best version of Kentucky, because we talked about it all offseason, Rob Dillingham, Reed Sheppard, deserved, to be clear, deserved top 10 picks in the NBA draft. But the best version of Kentucky, and I remember I did a segment about it after they lost to Tennessee at home. I'm sorry. It was with DJ Wagner at the point and those two guys coming off the bench. You can debate me, you can argue with me, but we discussed it at the time. DJ Wagner, during that stretch where Kentucky really struggled in the middle of the season, that was when he got hurt. Remember that 3-game losing streak? Florida at home, Tennessee at home, Gonzaga at home, 3 straight losses at home. That was when he got hurt. Did not play against Tennessee. Did not play against Florida at home. Did play against Gonzaga off the bench. That was maybe his first or second game back, and he was clearly not 100%, okay? What I would also say, and this sounds like a criticism of Reed Sheppard, but it wasn't. Kentucky was like 1-4 in games that he started. To me, the best version of Kentucky a year ago was DJ Wagner at the point. Those two guys coming off the bench, Reed not having to be the primary ball handler and the primary playmaker, initiator, whatever. So this doesn't have to be a revisionist history revisit of the 2023-2024 Kentucky Wildcats. But what it does have to do is to say that I believe that this kid is due for a breakout 2024-2025 season. Now, he has to stay healthy. But remember, this is a sophomore now, experienced in the SEC. And if he can stay healthy with the guys that they have, by the way, that was the big thing all offseason. Oh, Arkansas doesn't have a point guard. They don't have a point guard? The number 3 recruit in America who was the primary ball handler at Kentucky a year ago is not a point guard? Like, what are we doing? Of course he's a point guard, and he's a really good point guard. And if he plays, then just like last year, it allows John L. Davis to play off the ball, almost in that Reed Sheppard role where he doesn't have to be the primary playmaker. Boogie Fland can be that Rob Dillingham spark role. I'm really excited to watch this team. Now, DJ's got to stay healthy, but I am here to tell you, if this kid can stay healthy, I am a believer. I'm a DJ Wagner stan. I don't know what else there is to say. Like I did just say, we're going to have plenty more college hoops coverage, some interesting guests coming up as well. We are starting to get close to that time. I love college hoops. And obviously, as we get deeper into the season, we're going to talk about it more. But right now, it is a lot of football. There is one more topic I want to get to. Before we get to it, though, do quickly want to once again thank our partners, Collie Puffs. So I've told you about Collie Puffs all season long, right? Collie Puffs, it's football season. It's football season. You're on the couch Thursday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, Monday night. And what are you doing? Sitting there stuffing your little face. That's what you're doing, just like I do. Not criticizing you. I do the same thing. And you're probably sitting there saying, man, I'm eating a lot of crap. I'm putting bad stuff in my body. I need something healthy, but I also need something delicious. That's where Collie Puffs comes in. Family-owned company, not far from where I live. And their story is pretty straightforward. Young dad, about my age, young kids. They always went to the unhealthy part of the food aisle. And he said there has to be something healthy for them. There has to be something healthy for us. Like I said, he's a football fan. He's a Rams season ticket holder, Raiders season ticket holder, etc. And he said there's got to be something for us. There wasn't. So he created those guys right there, colliepuffs.com. They're baked, not fried, healthy ingredients. And the best part is they taste as good, better, dare I say, than any of the other store-bought stuff. Here's the cool part. They're getting in stores all across America now, but you can order them now. Tell them Torres sent you. Go to colliepuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. And you can also get them on Amazon as well. You may have heard of Amazon, but whatever you're ordering on Amazon, throw some Collie Puffs in your cart. Tell them Torres sent you. Appreciate your support. All right. So I do want to wrap. Just a couple quick notes. A little bit of a sad story is the passing of two legends on Monday, Dikembe Mutombo and Pete Rose. And we're not going to spend a ton of time. This is mostly a college sports show. The Dikembe Mutombo stuff, I actually feel bad. I was offline all morning, kind of missed it, saw it 3, 4, 5 hours later, whatever. I do want to start with Pete Rose, though, because Pete Rose, guy is just an icon. Guy is just a legend. And it's not very often that social media kind of comes together for one cause. But when Pete Rose passed, and it's the same with Dikembe Mutombo. We'll get to Dikembe Mutombo in a minute. But from Pete Rose's perspective, when he passed, I think people fully came together, understood how revered he was, understood how gifted he was, how he played the game a way that everybody loved, and really just how sad his passing is. A couple things. One, the skill speaks for itself. It's crazy. I was kind of trying to explain to Mrs. T, my wife, she said, who is this guy? Whatever. I said, look, and you guys and girls know this. You're smart sports fans, but a great career, an incredible career is 3,000 hits. I mean, think about how many great players limped to the finish line to get to 3,000 hits. I mean, Derek Jeter, I think, did it in, his final. Let's see how many career hits Derek Jeter has, because I'm actually curious about this. And this isn't to tear down Derek Jeter. It's just to say, like, Derek Jeter finished his career, let's see here, 3,400 hits. Okay. So maybe that's not the best example, but an all-time icon, Pete Rose had like 1,000 more hits than Derek Jeter. That is insane. That is insane. It speaks to how great he was. The stat that I saw that blew me away, 23 straight seasons with at least 100 hits. Okay. Did some quick mental math. I'm not great at math, but I think this is accurate. If a rookie in Major League Baseball right now, this second, got 100 hits this year, he would need to get 100 hits now every season from right now in 2024 until 2048 to break that record. Only 2047 to tie it. So it shows you the longevity of Pete Rose. Listen, there is the Hall of Fame stuff. I don't know. It felt like on social media, everybody was kind of in the same boat on the Hall of Fame. And if you guys and girls have thoughts on it, I would love to hear it. It just feels like he should be in. And I know I'm the guy, by the way, I'm the guy that when all these gambling problems have happened, Jonte Porter gets suspended for life. Calvin Ridley gets suspended for a year. I said, look, these guys know the rules. They know the stipulations, whatever. I do think it's different, though, when legalized sports betting comes in and these guys all have seminars. I could tell you, these professional teams have police, gambling people, seminars. They're told your phones are being tracked. Don't do it. You can bet on anything. Just don't bet on our sport. If you're an NBA player, you can bet on college basketball. You can bet on the NFL. You can bet on college football. You just can't bet on the NBA. And it's the same with the NFL. You can bet college football. You can bet baseball, whatever. And so I just bring it up because I do think that Pete Rose doing it in the 80s is a lot different. And I know there was signage, no betting on baseball dating back to Shoeless Joe Jackson. But I also think the narrative has changed around gambling because of where we are as a society. Remember, back then it was like dark ages. You don't talk about it. You don't play cards. You don't play dice. You don't bet on games. You don't do. And now it's like you turn on these games. Playoffs are going to start here. I think they did start. I'm not even a baseball guy. But it's like you turn on these games. It's like, DraftKings, an official partner of Major League Baseball, Caesar Sportsbook, MGM, BetMGM. It's like, the tenor has changed. It was 30 years ago. He should be in. It's crazy is just how much things have changed. I was thinking about this, okay? I'm going to give you a very weird parallel, but I was thinking about this, and I'll tell you why. It's because I am watching right now that Menendez brothers show on Netflix, okay? And I only bring it up because basically, if you have not seen it, it's like the best thing I've seen in forever. It is incredible. It's a deep dive. But I bring it up because I'm at the point now, and no spoilers, but I don't think it's a spoiler. They're going through their trial. And I think you probably know, if you know anything about the Menendez story, they're still in prison as of right now. There's actually a push to get them out. And a big part of the reason that they were convicted is because their argument, and again, I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but if I am, earmuffs, is basically their argument was they acted in self-defense because they were abused physically, emotionally, all the ways that children can be abused. Okay. And so I bring it up because at that time, there was kind of like this belief of like, well, boys can't be abused. Like girls can be abused physically, emotionally, whatever, but boys can't be. So how can they go to jail? How can they be in self-defense? Da, 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 da. And so why people are trying to get them out of jail now is because the tenor has changed on mental health and emotional abuse and physical abuse and all that. And it's kind of the same with Pete Rose. The gambling stuff today, if it happened today, feels a lot different than it would have 20, 30 years ago. So I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. And I'd add this really quick. You know, for people who don't know, one of my first jobs in sports was on the Fox FS1 TV lot. And I was there during the time that Pete Rose worked at FS1. First off, what's crazy to me is that even in a building, and I'm not saying this in any sort of arrogant way, but in a building with like big time athletes, there were always those rare athletes that it was like, that dude is a different level of famous and a different level of revered than some other guys, right? And that's not a knock, but like I've been in meetings with, guys that played in the NFL, but it's just different when Randy Moss walks in the room. And I've been in meetings with Randy Moss where it's like, oh crap, that's Randy Moss. Holy crap. And it was the same with Pete Rose. It was like, this is a massive building, 4 stories, da, da, da. And it was like, when you knew Pete Rose was in the building, it was just different. And I thought what was interesting, I shared this clip on my social media, but my buddy at the time, Royce, who now works at Apple TV, was producing Major League Baseball for FS1. And they did this kind of lengthy sit down with Pete Rose, A-Rod, and Frank Thomas breaking down like the art of hitting. And you can see as the segment goes on, like they start 3 Hall of Famers talking ball and, hitting and this and that. And then it's like, as the segment goes on, you can see kind of A-Rod and Frank Thomas, who, by the way, A-Rod, whatever you think of him, it's like one of the 5 most gifted people to ever play Major League Baseball. But A-Rod, Frank Thomas, they kind of take a step back and they listen to Pete. And so I never had any one-on-one time with them. Everybody that I know that worked with him liked him. Rest in peace, man. He is a legend. He is revered. I clearly think he should be in the Hall of Fame. My opinion doesn't matter, but I think Major League Baseball, I think, could do a lot of good by putting him in the Hall of Fame. And again, I do think it's different. Whatever. The point is being made. Really quickly on Dikembe Mutombo, I had never had any one-on-one experience with him. By the way, I will say this. Pete Rose was a bucket list Torres pod guest. When he put out a book about 4 or 5 years ago, I tried like hell to get him on the show. Did not work out. Quickly with Dikembe Mutombo, my memories are just like everybody else's. I'm a little young for the Georgetown days, but he played at Georgetown with Alonzo Mourning. Worth noting, I heard an interview with Alonzo Mourning. I think he was on one of these podcasts probably not that long ago. And he referenced, my teammate Dikembe, he's not doing well right now, but we love the big man. He's going to get right, blah, 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 this and that. So you knew he wasn't doing well, but he passes away at just 58 years old, which is obviously awful in its own right. But I think when you dive deeper, it's even sadder. It's sadder because 58 years old. What was kind of crazy to me, he played in the NBA till he was 43. Like I looked at his obituary. Says he died at 58, and I'm saying he played in 2009. That's 15 years ago. I'm not great at math, but that's 43 years old. He was playing in the NBA, so it's crazy. Obviously, I remember the finger wag like everybody else. Really sad. We still use that GIF all the time at AT Media whenever we're talking about whatever. And I think the most important thing really for his legacy is the work that he has done getting basketball to Africa. He's from the Congo originally. He came over when he was 16, 17, 18 years old, whatever he was. And, you see the impact that he had now, him, Akeem Olajuwon, whatever, you look at the NBA, you look at college basketball. I mean, think about college basketball. All the guys that are originally from Africa that are now playing college basketball. Agana Nyenso, I'm thinking about him right now. He's obviously at Kansas State, was at Kentucky. Whoever, who. I mean, if you watch college basketball, there are guys from Africa all over the sport. And so Dikembe Mutombo was kind of one of those early trailblazers. I should mention Manute Bol, who played in my home state of Connecticut at University of Bridgeport as well, but then worked so much to do charity work in Africa. And that, this stuff is always sad, but this guy clearly gave so much of himself to everybody else. Just really sad to see the passing of Dikembe Mutombo. All right. I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres pod. I think we're going to get out of here. Don't need to take any more questions or comments. Obviously, I do see that Paul says that Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. I agree. Another conversation for another day. If you're not subscribed, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you are following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. All for today's show. We'll be back on Friday, start to preview the weekend ahead. It's not a lot of big games, but we know that's when things always get crazy. So shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick. NBA season is coming. Unblock me, you F-head. I'll be back